Morning, I'm going to demonstrate how to make probiotic drinks with dairy kefir. I thought it would be easier to do it myself than look on the internet for something that includes all the information that I want to share. So we will go to this darker part of the kitchen that doesn't have as much light. We will be interrupted because I have a family, but I put the kefir overnight in an area that's not as bright as the other parts of the kitchen so that it can ferment. We are advised to either put a lid on very gently or put a clean linen cloth over the top with a rubber band in order to allow it to receive oxygen. This kefir, my friend says, when it starts bubbling, that means that it has fermented. And if we've got a lot of bubbling and a lot of separation, then it's very likely that the kefir grains have grown. They're feeding, they're growing, they're live probiotic bacteria. So if they've grown and there are too many for the size of the amount of kefir I want to create every day, then I need to divide them. So what I did was I gave you half of kefir that I had grown last month because I don't need to make very much. So the way that I remove the kefir grains, I use a plastic spoon and I use a plastic sieve because there's rumour that the kefir grains don't like to touch metal, that it bothers them and they don't grow as well. I have also been told to use a plastic lid rather than a metal lid. I'm not sure how valid some of these things are, some of these rumours. A lot of people all over the world, in Turkey and Russia and Poland and lots of different countries, do fermented dairy drinks. So this is kind of common folkloric knowledge, possibly true. I don't know what the research is on it, but I've been told that they don't love metal, so I try to keep them away from metal. The way that I do it is I put it into the sieve and I allow it to drop down into a Tupperware bowl or a Tupperware box, and I stir it to loosen the grains from the rest of the drink. If I've left it for more than 24 hours, then it creates a very, very thick yogurt-like drink. If you leave it for 12 hours, you'll just have something like a very light fermented milk. It just depends on how busy I am. Sometimes I prefer the yogurt. I can make smoothies, I can put it on fruit, or sometimes it's very thin and I just prefer to drink it. Really, it's about what's convenient to you. If you want to be doing it every 12 hours, that's your prerogative. I like to do it every 24 hours. That's just convenient to me. There are two kinds of kefir. One is called water grains and the other one is called dairy kefir. The water kefir is fed by adding sugar to water. I chose to go with the dairy kefir because I didn't want to have a sugar water drink every day. I'm sure that the kefir grains eat a lot of that sugar and turn it into the fermented drink that we all know and love, like kombucha, which is a very bubbly version of water kefir. But I just felt because I'm trying to avoid sugar, I didn't want to do water kefir. I have been trying to switch from dairy kefir to coconut milk kefir in order to cut out the dairy part, just in case that's something that's bothering my thyroid. But I find that every couple of days, the grains are looking really weak, like they're undernourished. And I know that you're meant to add some dairy, even if you're doing coconut milk, every 24 hours or so, in order to replenish the grains themselves. This is the grains with a remainder of milk on them. And normally, every single day, I'd take them from the jar that they were fermented in. I would remove the excess, and I don't know if I can do this with one hand, but I try to scrape it off the bottom like that. But I do it with two hands, it's much easier. And then I take those grains and I put them straight in a clean jar. And then I take that clean jar and I cover it with the sterilized linen cloth and put the rubber band over the top and put it in the darker part of my kitchen and leave it for 24 hours. However, there are too many grains here for the size that I want to do. I normally only want to do half a jar. There aren't that many people in my home who are drinking the kefir with me, so I just want to do a small amount. And my friend who gave me the grains tells me that this is too much for the amount that I want to do. So the way that I will clean them and store half of them in the freezer is the way that I froze them to prepare to share with you. And the friend who gave them to me, she said, traditionally you don't take money for them. You pass them on to people who are interested. And I really like that tradition. I think it's really sweet. I don't really worry if there's any kefir grains remaining in that jar. You can eat them directly, apparently, and they're good for your lower intestine. So I return the kefir to the jar that it had fermented in order just to save on washing up. And I put this kefir in the jar. This is the one I made last night. Unfortunately, I don't have many jars with plastic lids. This was a peanut butter jar originally. So I'm going to have to put a metal lid on this one in order to store it in the fridge. And this, as long as I am not touching the kefir with the metal, it should be okay for 2 to 3 days. So this will go in the fridge. It looks like this, or I might just drink it directly. Or, as I said, add it to smoothies. Sometimes I add it to sauces, pasta sauces. Sometimes I just put it on fruit, cut fruit. I haven't yet put it in any hot drinks. I'm not sure what boiling it to that level will do. So this is the way we can clean the kefir. I try not to use incredibly hot or incredibly cold water. They are living things, so I don't want to shock them. And then with a slightly more gentle bit of water, I wash them out, wash off that dairy layer that they had been feeding on. I noticed in some French research that these are called Tibetan mushrooms in the French community. And I think that's about right. They are probiotic, they are growing, they are fungi, as it were. And what I need to do, I might have to put the phone down for 1 minute. Let's see. Turn on the water again. I want to take off all the milk remainder. And my friend suggests to leave them to dry out a little bit after you wash them. She washes them after every single fermentation. So every single day she washes them out and she leaves them to dry a little bit and then she puts them in a new jar. However, I don't really have that luxury of time. I have to go sort my family out and I tend to give them a bit of a shake and then put them back in the jar. They're looking a bit stringy, and I think that's because I do a lot of coconut milk fermentation and they don't have as much growth as they do if I did dairy every single day. So these should be drying out a little bit. It's controversial to wash them out every time. Some people who make kefir say, don't wash them. They are growing, they need to eat the dairy that's feeding off of them. If you put them back in the jar with dairy on them, then you're not stopping their cycle of feeding and growth. I'm not sure why my friend suggests to wash them every day, but I've noticed that on some YouTube videos about kefir, people are suggesting to wash them, and on other ones they suggest to put them straight back in the jar with kefir on them. I feel, coming from Alaska, there's a theory about, not a theory, a practice that sourdough yeast should always be kept, and you use a little bit of the yeast that's been passed on to you from other people who grew that yeast. So I do understand the growth mechanism that means don't wash it and kill it and put it back to use. Try to keep it alive. So normally I don't rinse them, but because I'm going to store some for you today, I've rinsed these. So I'll put about half in this jar. Let's see. There we go. So that's about half. And I'll leave those there to dry for a minute. And I've got this jar here, and I'm going to fill it up. I like going about halfway. This is quite a large jar. I like going about halfway. Notice there's no metal on the jar. It looks a bit dirty because I set the sieve on there earlier because I didn't want to put it on the metal or on the counter. I don't want to transfer any bacteria to the live kefir grains. So I'm going to get some milk rather than coconut milk. Because I've rinsed these, I want to feed them again and help them grow again. So I'm just going to get some milk. You should be using raw milk if you're going to use dairy. I find it a little bit difficult to go and source raw milk as regularly as I need to. And my friend who does it with raw milk, she boils the milk first, then lets it cool down, and then adds it to her kefir grains. Here. So for our family, about half a jar is enough for my husband and I to partake with it, and for me to add it to sauces without having too much left over in the fridge. See, I've already got that from yesterday, this one from today, and this one will be for tomorrow. So if I were to make, let's say, a full jar of this, I think that would be too much for us to consume before it goes off. So as I said, I'm using full Belgian milk from the supermarket. I would prefer to be using raw milk, but it's too challenging at this time for our family. And then every couple of days, I will leave the dairy cream on it, put it in a new jar, and put only coconut milk in there. So I would prefer to have only coconut milk every time, but I've noticed the grains start changing color. They're not so happy looking, so it's not something I can do every day. Now I'm going to take this over to the darker part of my kitchen, and I put this linen cloth over the top, and I put a rubber band on it. There. So it will receive oxygen from here with no bacteria or bugs coming through. Put it in the shade, and it will ferment over 12 hours and then again 24 hours. They say don't leave the coconut milk for more than 24 hours. However, I have left the dairy milk for a little bit more than 24 hours, and it's not been a problem. It just means you get a thicker yogurt-like consistency. So this was the day before, this was today. I'm going to pop these in the fridge and remind my husband to have his fair share. We both feel that it's been very helpful in preventing flus over the last few months. So these have dried out a little bit. I would like to leave them a little tiny bit longer, but I need to go and get my child off to the park and get some energy out. So the way that I was taught to store them is you take quite a small plastic bag, and we're going to put them in this plastic bag just like the one that I gave you. Hold on a minute. I don't know how to do this with one hand. Interestingly, I've read research that shows that kefir grains change with the seasons, and they change with the different types of milk that you might choose. Raw milk or buttermilk or goat milk or long-lasting milk, because you're getting different kinds of sugars that are feeding them. And so the kefir grains might change color, they might create a thicker milk in the wintertime. Apparently, goat milk is fantastic to do with them. So my friend said, gently try to spread them out and try to get all the air out. Sorry, I don't know how to do this with one hand. Push gently, try to get all the air out. Seal it up. There we go. It's pretty good. And then you can put it in the freezer. I'm not sure how long they're meant to last in the freezer, but my friend and I were talking about how she went on holiday in the summertime and needed to, there we go, now they're in the corner of my freezer. And she needed to stop her 24-hour kefir process, and the only way to do that was to freeze them over the summer. So she froze them and took them back out and started them again, and everything was fine. They started growing after a few days. Maybe the first couple of days were not very well fermented because they were waking up a bit, but after the first couple of days, they started growing again, multiplying again, and everything was fine. So a couple other things. If you want to go on holiday, feel free to put them in the freezer. If they fall on metal, don't put them back in the jar. I just eat them because I'm told they're so good for you. And also, if you're going to ferment them, I've seen someone on YouTube using a very small plastic container, like a butter or ice cream container, to ferment their kefir, and I was under the impression that that's not helpful because it's fermenting, so it's breaking down the plastic, and you'll be receiving, I can't remember what the word is, but you don't want those plastic elements in your drink, so it's better to use a glass jar than a plastic container to do your fermentation. Some people eat them raw, just eat the grains, and that helps their stomach. So yeah, that's all the information I have about making kefir. I hope that it's been helpful. As you grow them and they multiply, feel free to freeze some and pass them on. Pass them on to another person who wants to make kefir. It's really hard to find live grains online, of course. You don't know where they're coming from, you don't know what they're made out of, blah, 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 blah. And apparently you can get powdered ones or ones that are in little sachets. I've never used them before. They might be very helpful if you need to take a few days break here and there. I don't know how they work. There are probably videos online that involve those sachets. My friend received those kefir grains from her mother, who is in Bosnia, so that's a Bosnian kefir that you have. The provenance of it is from Bosnia, so the people of Bosnia will have certain probiotics that relate to their region. I think it would be quite cool to have kefir from the region that you're based in. You probably have, therefore, antibodies or whatnot that maybe relate to the region that you're in, similar to eating honey that has provenance from the same region that you're in. You might then have fewer pollen allergies to the flowers in your region because birds have processed those flowers. Bees have processed those flowers for you. I don't know. I feel like it would be nice to have location-dependent kefir, but at this time, as a global citizen, we're working with location-independent kefir. I hope that helps. Good luck. Talk to you soon. Bye.